On today's episode of the Social Studies Show, we have Samira Jackson, Account Executive at Art Machine in Hollywood. Samira has made her way through the ranks, working on award-winning campaigns like BlackKKKLansman with Gravillis and taking insights from Spike Lee. On a rise in the entertainment industry, she navigated the career path at Leroy and Rose, Cold Open, and Ignition. Positivity and culture are prominent themes of her personality, whether she is traveling abroad or mentoring the next generation. We have met, years ago when you were working at Cold Open, and I was just so enthralled by your presence and just what you've been doing in this workspace. It was really interesting to me because there aren't many people of color working in the entertainment business at your level. So I'm really excited, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Absolutely. So I am originally from Detroit, born and raised. I went to school at Michigan State, where I got my bachelor's in human resources, so more of a business background. And ultimately, I got my MBA in marketing and strategic management. So,
and meanwhile, while you're volunteering.
While I'm volunteering,
getting your MBA, that. So, let's just go. So, not to destroy it, but I mean, trying to get your MBA and then volunteering with Black Girls Code.
Yes.
And get that. It just shows a little bit of where your priorities lie as far as again, educating yourself and then helping others along their journey. So I just wanted to highlight that, and we'll come back to that, but
absolutely
continue on that because the other second thing that's really interesting is getting your start in human resources.
Yeah.
But then moving your way up through the ranks, because it's Cold Open, Leroy and Rose, Gravillis, all the way up to Art Machine now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so starting in human resources, tell us a little bit about that journey.
Sure. Well, just to back up a little bit, my journey has not been linear at all. It has not been a linear journey at all.
Okay.
HR, I kind of stumbled into it. If I'm being completely honest, when I was in undergrad, I really had no direction.
Okay.
I started school thinking that I was going to be a chemical engineer. I initially got a chemical engineering scholarship to go to Alabama A&M. So that's where I started my collegiate career. I went to Alabama A&M for a year, my freshman year, and I hated it. And I hope that doesn't come off wrong. It just wasn't for me.
Okay.
It wasn't the college experience that I was looking for. I really wanted to go to an HBCU. Applied to a few. Alabama A&M gave me the most money. They gave me a scholarship. I went there and I realized that I didn't like being in Alabama and I didn't like chemical engineering. And so ultimately I transferred to Michigan State, and that's where I finished my collegiate career.
Can I ask you a question about talking about this and working from people in diverse communities going into entertainment business? Did you look at chemical engineering as it's a safe career? Is it something kind of your family were okay, this is something because...
Absolutely. Growing up, I loved the arts. I was very artistic. I danced, ballet, tap, jazz, modern, all of the traditional dances. I love drawing. I love photography. But that was encouraged as hobbies. It wasn't encouraged to become an artist or somebody that's in performing arts.
So let's touch on that because in the Black community, it's something that I definitely struggle with. And my family thought I was crazy when I went to go study photography school. So I want to hear your perspective, especially as a Black female pursuing these things. And it's a really tough thing when your whole community and people around you are telling you this is something you can't do. So I just want to hear about your experience of that.
Yeah, especially at the time, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was the artists are starving artists, You're not going to make a career out of your artistic ambitions. So you, Samira, I was also very scholastic. I had good grades in school. I always, I loved school. I did well. And so it was really encouraged, you like your arts, that's fine, and it's cute, and you can do that on the side, but you have a brain. So use that brain to be a lawyer, or be an engineer, or
it's funny when people will be sunning you.
Yeah.
They're that's a cool thing, pet project.
Yeah, but to their defense, out of, out
Civil
of
rights,
love.
60s, like that.
Exactly.
Opportunity.
Exactly. Like you want to take full advantage of like the skills that you have that's going to propel you forward. And growing up, we grew up in a low income, community. And so, my family was really like, no, you wanna go to college and get the degrees and get the good job that make the money. So that was the motivation for, my business background, for going in a more safe, trying to attain a more safe career.
So now you're in HR.
And now I'm in HR, yes.
And then you diverge into entertainment. So
Yeah.
what is the thing that clicked for you to be like, okay, I can do this? And like you had a measure of success that like it just like that propelled you further in that career.
Well, again, it was not linear at all, and it was not it was not intentional. I got my degree, my undergrad degree in HR, and it was like, okay, I did this, but what now? And this was in the early 2000s when there weren't that many people like really seeking out college grads. It was hard to find a job. So ultimately, out of undergrad, I went into retail management, and I ran a clothing store for about 2 years until I realized, like, okay, I do have a business acumen. I like business. I like working in a business setting, but retail management just seems limiting. Like it seems like there's so much more out there for me. So that's when I decided to go back to grad school. I went back to Michigan State, got my MBA in marketing and strategic management, and got exposed to more, higher level opportunities in the corporate world.
So what brought you to LA then?
We're getting there.
Okay. Driving Miss Daisy right here. Okay. You're doing this. All right.
So maybe 6 months before graduating with my MBA, I got offered a job at the Dow Chemical Company.
Okay.
This was an 18-month rotational program, 3 different rotations, 6 months in different areas of the business.
Business units, yeah?
Yeah, in business units, yeah. And the most money I'd ever seen in an offer, and it was just like, you made it, here we go, let's go for it. But again, in the industry, the chemicals industry, I had no interest in it. I had no passion for it. However, I took the opportunity, worked in 6 months in my first rotation, and I would pray to God, please, the next opportunity, the next rotation, please let it be something that just speaks to my soul. And 6 months later, I got laid off.
God works in mysterious ways.
Be careful what you pray for.
Okay.
Or be specific.
All right.
But it was such a blessing in disguise because at that point, now, I've been through college, undergrad, I've been through grad school, I've been in Michigan at this point pretty much my whole life except that 1 year in Alabama. And I was ready to go. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to just get out there and do what you wanted to do. This was 2008. So in 2009, January 2009 actually is when I got laid off. And, Obama was just inaugurated, and we're in the throes of the economic downturn of 2008. And
we
it
had
just
those hope
felt
posters.
Hope, dream, change. This was the time. And so for me, I internalized that. I really did. I was just like, it's time to go. I had no game plan. The only thing I had out here in LA was my twin brother.
Okay.
He had been living out here for 2 years, pursuing his acting career. And I remember calling him the day I got laid off, and I was like, I got laid off, and I don't know what to do, just in tears. And he's like, you got an MBA in marketing, come out to LA and figure it out. And I was like, maybe I will.
I love your phone, just like shouts out.
He
Looks like
did.
we can do this.
He
All right.
did. We got each other's back forever, you know? So yeah, that was in January when I got laid off. In March of 2009, I was living in LA.
Okay, so then is that how you went into Ignition, and then because I met you at Cold Open?
You met me at Cold Open, yeah. So that was my second opportunity in entertainment marketing. But it took a while. It took a while for me to really find my place. I came out here with my MBA and all my high hopes, thinking I'm going to be a marketing manager at, Warner Brothers or Universal. And I'm applying to these positions and they're like, yeah, your MBA is nice, but where's your entertainment experience? And that's when I was like, oh, okay, so I got to get that. And I learned about the agency side of the business. That these marketing departments, yes, they exist, and yeah, they do develop strategies, but they outsource a lot of that artwork. And so I met a woman who became a really good friend who was actually in an account executive position at Ignition. And she's like, yeah, I'll bring you in, we'll get you in. And even interviewing there, they were just like, yeah, it's nice, her, you seem smart, good, but you don't have the experience. I want to be clear that I didn't go directly into the creative role. I fell back on my business acumen.
So that's where I kind of like see, because when we were talking about human resources, like you just took the opportunity to jump at this position so you could gain the experience.
Absolutely.
And then work your way in that way, because I mean, obviously, like if you're saying like education didn't mean anything, it was all about experience and who you know.
And who you know, exactly. But in hindsight, and even at the time, I realized that, no, this is good. This is where you kind of want to be, because now I'm getting the business side of, and that's where my mind was trained to go anyway, is to understand like how these companies operate, how this industry operates. So I started off in an accounting role. That transitioned to operations, which ultimately led to operations in HR. Then I got into HR. That was my last role at Ignition. I was there for 3 years, and it was a great experience, but I realized that I'm still like bouncing around administrative tracks, and I really wanted to get on the creative side. So 3 years at Ignition, and then an opportunity to become an account coordinator opened at Code Open. And so that was my first, I'd say that was my first opportunity in this space as an account person and working with the creative.
Okay. And so just so you can kind of elaborate for the audience, like what an account coordinator, like what were some of your responsibilities, and like how those, because I want to set the stage for where you started with your business like that, and where you are now and what you've accomplished in that.
Absolutely.
So we can kind of talk about that journey.
Yeah. So as an account coordinator, I was there to support the account executive, which ultimately became my role. I was doing, making sure that we had all the assets we needed from our clients to develop the creative, and making sure that, we're following up on invoicing with the client, and just doing a lot of the administrative duties that are necessary in project management without that,
To facilitate the content.
Exactly. Okay. So it was great. It was again very entry level, but it was great learning opportunity, and it wasn't easy at all.
No, it's difficult work. I don't think people really understand how much and like the amount of hours that people put into time as far as just like doing entertainment advertising.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of, I think, a wake up call, because people think it's just going to be like sunshine and rainbows and meetings at the beach, and it's definitely not that.
Absolutely not.
So from there, then you made your jump to Leroy and Rose.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So how did they find you, and how did that come about?
Again, all about who you know and your reputation. I was developing this reputation as a very capable account person, but it just didn't. It seemed I was approached to work at Leroy and Rose by a former colleague at Code Open, who actually was my supervisor. She was my account executive. So she had left Code Open maybe a year before I did. And Leroy and Rose at the time was a startup. And they were developing the agency. And so she was transitioning out of the industry entirely. And so she was looking for a replacement, and they were looking for a replacement, Leroy and Rose was, and approached me with the opportunity to become an account manager. So it was a bit of a step up from where I was at Code Open.
Okay, so quick question.
Yes.
What were some of the differences of working with a startup versus an established
Yeah.
agency? That because, obviously this is going to take us into Gravillis, so
Yep,
like working for a
yep.
Black-owned agency. So I just want to hear a little bit about like what the startup world was like.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, before we dive into the startup world, I just want to commend Code Open. Like, they were so structured in the way like I was trained. I always say I'm glad I started my account management career at Code Open, because they were like, this is how you do it. Procedures.
And operationals.
Yes, the operations. I mean,
That's a hard thing for creatives. Like, it's a hard
Exactly.
thing for creatives to really like put procedure, put
Yes.
structure, put strategy,
Yeah.
and line it all up together to go with the creative. And that is a really hard thing to do. Like sometimes even
truly
myself,
is.
I'm like, but sometimes I manage it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But it's necessary, because this is what our clients are coming to us for
For
this
rollouts, for
organization.
for blockbuster films, for worldwide distribution.
Exactly. You have to have a procedure, like a tight procedure, and Code Open definitely had that. And so I attribute a lot of my success to being a good account person, to the fact that I started out there. So when I went to Leroy and Rose, now this is a startup that
You're implementing procedure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they brought me on to do that. And I was wearing a lot of hats there. In hindsight, looking back, I'm like, I was probably at VP level when I left Leroy and Rose, just because of all of the things that I had to do and all the, the learnings that took place. But yeah.
The circus bear spinning plates on poles.
all that.
Okay.
Juggling so much.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So looking at that, and like again, this is like the second time that I kind of ran into you just recently. Like you were at Gravillis and you were working for Kenny, Indiana.
Well, that was the third time actually, because if you remember
All
the second time,
right.
we had lunch when I was working at Leroy and Rose. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we did. Jeez, like I forgot. Like I get that. Like it's like these tangents.
So long
like
ago.
Yeah.
No.
So that was a random of like having that, and it's so
Exactly.
awesome just to run into you there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so going from now from procedure to where they've got structure.
Yes.
But then also they're pioneers in a space where like there aren't really a lot of there aren't Black creative entertainment agencies as far as that. Starting from album covers and music into movies and working into all the different like creative that goes on behind the scenes, because there's so much just like B-roll and assets for that, and like shooting behind the scenes and how the movie's made. So I don't think people really see that. And they put a really interesting flavor on it. Like, I really love what they did with the Five Bloods.
Yeah.
Like that. So that was a really good
such
thing of seeing just like the behind the scenes of how they got that artwork there.
Yeah.
So tell us about that and like what you learned there,
Yes.
because you went back from VP down to kind of like a little
I know, right? Down to project manager again.
But
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I realized that from a resume standpoint, it may look like I was taking a step back going to Gravillis as a project manager from being at Leroy and Rose as an account executive, but I really sought out to work at Gravillis primarily because they were a Black-owned agency in this space. And like you said, so few. I think there's more popping up now, but at that time, which was 2017, I think they could say they were the only Black-owned agency
I'm pretty
in
sure
LA.
they were. And
Yeah.
I think what's an interesting step when you look at that and you look at BET, you look at Tyler Perry, you look at the WB, all these different types of narratives about diverse communities and stuff like that. And in the entertainment world, there's only potentially one agency at the time that could really service all those different types of titles and films,
Right.
but it's not. And so I think sometimes when you lose a step, or you might have different narratives of how to go about advertising that, right? Because it's something where it's interesting, because do you know Deborah Lee? She's from, so I met her recently on a shoot, and it was interesting shooting her and just talking to her about that stuff. But her running BET and thinking about how to talk about these narratives and from our place, but putting it on a global scale. And so it's interesting now because all these things are popping up in more different movies and that. And so it creates more opportunity, and obviously it gave you more room to work on these things.
Absolutely.
So I want to hear a little bit about that, because obviously this is pre-George Floyd, and I'd like to talk a little bit how that marketing, diverse marketing has changed and opportunity has come about since the kind of like I'd say the Great Black Awakening.
Right, right. No, that's yeah, totally valid. I started at Gravillis in 2017, and it was a time when, like you mentioned, there's these there's this black-centered content out there, film, TV, but it was clear that in the advertising, like, it just wasn't measuring up to, you could just tell it wasn't coming from an authentic black voice, right? And so one of the things the Gravillis very much emphasized is that they didn't want to be pigeonholed as the black agency. But when I came in, I was like, no, this is a way for us to capitalize on this. You know, like these clients need to know that there's agency. There is an agency that understands that audience and that can speak to it in the marketing. And so I took full advantage of, being the black project manager.
Well, there's two sides to that, and I think this is where it's really interesting before and after, right? What people don't understand is like when even companies go to agency of record, things like that, you don't get a lot of mix of like diverse agencies in the mix.
True.
And so literally for a black agency to survive, they had to try and go and find out, being like, no, we can do some Asian marketing, we can do Caucasian marketing, we can do these things out there, because that's where I came from photography, because I've been shooting before, everything in George Floyd, and like, you had to be adapted all these different things just to make enough money to be able to pay everyone in the business, right?
Without a doubt, yeah.
And so your philosophy in that time is like, well, I need to go after these other things so I can afford to stay in business.
Exactly. And they did that. And they did so well. And that's why I would always say, like, we don't have to be concerned about being pigeonholed as a black agency, because the work shows for itself. Like, Gravillis has an immaculate, just a fantastic portfolio. And so, but now we're in a space where it's needed, it's
People
necessary.
are seeking it out.
There's a demand
and
for
then
it.
Now it's stretched out to the LGBTQ plus community, to the Asian community, to the transgender community, to women specific titles. And so that's where you see a little more of this popping up, but that wasn't the case. And I think sometimes people's memories is short.
Yeah.
Like they like think like this was a couple years ago.
Yeah, this is just like 5-6 years
like
ago.
literally, I was just looking at this thing where we were talking about like Black and Con, right? And they're doing a whole thing where they just launched it, and I'm like, they just launched it. It's 2023. Like it's just so this really is relative to right now and here. And so I think I wanted to talk a bit about that so people understand that there was a change there.
Absolutely. There was definitely a change, and I feel like, again, not strategic at all, not linear at all. Like, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. At the time when I came, when I started working at Gravillis, and Kenny Gravillis is the owner of Gravillis. He has a long-standing relationship with Spike Lee. So at that time, Spike had started putting out just a lot more content, films and TV shows.
That was right when he did the whole BlackKKKLansman, because you worked on BlackKKKlansman.
I worked on BlackKKKlansman, which is one of my favorite campaigns.
That
I know we'll get to it. Oh my gosh, I love it so much.
Let's get into it, because I want to hear about this, because that was a phenomenal movie and great campaign.
Yeah, well, my first Spike project was this film that he did on Amazon Prime called The Passover. It was based on a stage play, and he just made it into a film. That's when I met Spike, which was a dream come true, because he's probably my favorite filmmaker of all time. And so growing up and watching his films, it was just like a dream come true. And so working on The Passover, that's when he's like, yeah, I'm working on this film, BlackKKKlansman, with focus features, and you guys are on it. And immediately I tell Kenny, I'm on it. That's my project,
You came and claimed it. Okay,
I claimed it immediately. And so, we learned about this story, which is just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
This guy, infiltrates the, police department. He was a police officer who ultimately infiltrates the KKK. And So we came up with concepts, when it comes to us, when a project comes to us, we're developing sketches for a photo shoot. Of course, like Spike is different from a lot of, like working with Spike is just so rewarding because he has his ideas. He don't care what the studios are talking about. He gonna go straight to Kenny to say what I want to see on the art, and everybody just has to get on board.
Acquiesce.
And thankfully, acquiesce exactly. And thankfully, Focus Features, they're a great client to work with. I'm actually starting to work on some projects with them again now. They were totally like hands off, absolutely. Whatever Spike says goes, and so. We developed these concepts from, Spike's brain, and ultimately did a photo shoot, a key art photo shoot. He was really specific with who he wanted to do the shoot. We shot with Latoya Ruby Frazier, whose background isn't in key art, but she's a phenomenal photographer, and so getting her on board was a challenge as well.
Well, it's like one thing because they don't have a lot of black photographers to shoot key art.
Hello.
Like they do not, like it is such a hard club to get into. Knocking anyone in right there, right? But like I've done a couple, but literally, it is crazy.
It is. I
So,
know. Even then, but he really wanted her, and it took a lot for us to get her on board. But she was on board, came out here.
Awesome.
We did the shoot with John David Washington, who was an amazing talent, just so easy to work with.
It's funny because it's such a because what was the other actor in that?
Adam Driver.
Yeah. So because it was such a turn of events for both of those actors. I'd never seen them in that because I think John David was doing Ballers.
He was doing Ballers, yeah.
So it was just like all of a sudden to see him turn up with that with the afro and doing that. I was like, but you guys did such a great job in that. And that's like one of those things where it's like, I look at that because I look at that turn that he's made with that and like Tenet. And become quite a leading man.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, anyway,
he's a phenomenal talent.
You guys did a great job with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that campaign. It's probably my favorite campaign to date. But yeah, and the strategy was, the title speaks for itself. It's BlackKKKLansman with 3 Ks in the middle. Like it's clear what this is about. We want a black person leading the creative entirely. So it was everything that we developed, all of the key art that we developed was solely centered on John David Washington. And it was just super rewarding. The photography came back amazing. We went there, they sent us for the photo shoot, they sent us the actual Klansman cap that was I think it was authentic to the time. They used it in the film, and so we were able to use it in the artwork. And I wish I have the book at home actually, but that art with John David wearing the Klansman hat,
Just a juxtaposition.
Yeah, with the fist up.
So crazy.
Just powerful, just absolutely powerful.
No, it's funny because one thing I just recently did is I went to the Tulsa Massacre Museum.
Ooh.
And that is such an interesting, powerful
I bet.
experience of going through there and seeing something that's very interactive. So that's, when you think about giving people that feeling of going to that interactive museum and experience the Tulsa Massacre, that's kind of how that poster makes people feel. Because when it first came out, I was kind of like, what the F is this? I literally saw the poster and I was kind of like, this is weird. But that was the whole point of
that was the point. It was shock value.
Just to give you this feeling of things. I'm like, once I saw it, I was like, okay, settle down. Let me see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And then saw the movie and was like, damn, this is a good movie.
Yeah, and if you recall in the film, he never wore a Klan's hat, but that Spike was like, I want this for my marketing.
Yeah.
And super impactful poster that I'm just so proud to
drove
be part
far.
of. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So I guess one question for that is one question I have for you is working through crisis, some of the things of tough clients and talents and just creative and making it align, teamwork, because something I saw in a lot of things, you have a lot of bios on LinkedIn for that, people reviews, and the positivity was an underlying theme of all your endorsements was just you're so positive. And so tell me about that, like working with crisis and working with like A-list talent.
Yeah.
And like, how do you make it all fit? How do you like juggle all those pieces?
Yeah, well, I always describe myself as just a naturally optimistic person. I don't know where it comes from. I've always been this way. Maybe it's, having my brother, my twin brother, he's very just like bold and expressive and like, like what I say goes and and there had to be a balance growing up.
Okay.
So it probably came from childhood, but yeah, I've always just embraced the term you catch more bees with honey than vinegar.
So the second experience of that, because I was looking at, like, you studied abroad. You like
Yes.
did business in Monterey, Mexico, and then Rome,
Yeah.
Italy. So do you think because of these travels and seeing all these different cultural people, it made you able to engage with different types of people and cultures?
Absolutely. Again, going back to it, and it started at Michigan State. One of the things that drove me to Michigan State was they had a very strong, and I think still to this day have a very strong study abroad program. And I really, really wanted to study abroad. So my first experience was in Rome in undergrad. I spent the summer in Rome, and of course, there was some culture shock that came with that, but it was such a rich, rewarding experience.
What was the culture shock?
I think there were maybe like, again, this was 2003, so a long time ago, but there were about 20 to 30 students in our group. I was the only Black student. And, I stood out. I stood out heavily. When I first got to Rome, I traveled there by myself. Again, my first international experience. So just being on the plane for that long was culture shock in itself. But when I got there, I got lost. I wound up in some like remote Roman neighborhood. Somehow figured out my way back to the hotel, and I was just like, yeah, this is not going to be easy for you. This is going to be, this is going to require you. Yeah, very challenging.
And patience.
And very patient. And again, this is my first time out of the country. So, and I'm in my early 20s at the time. So I'm like, there were moments when it's just like, I don't speak this language. I'm tired. I want to go home. Like, like
Google Translate.
Seriously, like, where's the fried chicken? Where's, like, where are the things? There were moments when I just needed that familiarity of home. So, but it was very few.
Yeah, no,
because I'm a naturally curious person too, so I realized how rewarding that experience was in real time and how it would benefit me in life. And yes, I think that experience, also just going to Michigan State, is what led me to be able to work with so many different types of people. So yeah.
All right. We already talked about one of your favorite projects, but I just want to say if there were a couple other favorite meaningful projects that we can kind of mention and talk about and kind of dissect a bit.
Yeah, plenty. One that stands out is a project I'm actually working on right now with Art Machine, currently at Art Machine. And this project is with our Netflix Japan client.
Okay.
Which, first of all, like working with this client, they are a dream. Like these international clients, they come to us with stars in their eyes, right? They're like, you guys are Hollywood, whatever we come to you for your experience. And so it's just been really rewarding working with this client. And it led to me traveling to Tokyo last year for the photo shoot. Yeah.
Awesome.
Which initially when our client was like, yeah, we need to develop concepts for a photo shoot and let us know who could come here. And so, right, exactly. And so, of course, the creative director was on board to go, had to go. And then the president of our company also was like, yeah, I got to go for business development. And I'm like, well, I need to go to make sure everything is in line because I've been running this project from the beginning. So I need to be there too. And thankfully our client was like, yeah, all three of you, we'd love to meet you, And so such a rewarding opportunity. It's a pretty extensive campaign. It hasn't come out yet, so I can't speak too much about it. But
we'll put it in the credits right here.
Yeah,
later on when it comes
exactly.
out. Bam, right there. Okay.
But yeah, we shot, you know, a whole bunch. It's a large cast, so we had to develop concepts for teasers, for the payoff art, for characters. Motion concepts as well. So it's a pretty robust campaign, and we really
social media behind the scenes, all that stuff like that.
I hope we didn't capture that, but I'm sure.
Because I mean, it's like a lot of times they split it between so many different agencies, like which is
Yeah.
funny. You see how so much art from split up.
Yeah, I see a lot of that on the domestic side. But yeah, I would not be surprised if on the Japan side, on the Japanese side, they do something like that, because the photo shoot just went so well. It was just so, it ran so smoothly, and you know, the client recognized that a lot of that came from the account side and the planning of it. And so I'm just so proud of this campaign, how it's still going to this day, how our clients are still responding incredibly favorably to everything. And yeah, I can't wait for it to come out so I can be like, yeah, I was there.
Awesome.
I met him.
So, going on that vein, one of my things was, how has technology for marketing for movies changed?
Oh man, it has changed drastically. Like when I first started in entertainment marketing, I think Netflix was probably the only streamer at the time. This is like 2013, right? And at that time, it was still about making movie posters. It was still about developing outdoor campaigns, at least on the print side for us. However, like look at the market now. There's a new streaming service every month, you know.
And then merging
and then the mergings and the acquisitions.
Like you got Freevee for Amazon, you got Paramount, you got Paramount Plus.
All my clients.
And like, you know, so it goes in all these different veins, and then so IMDb, well, that changed to Freevee.
Yeah.
Anything like that. I'm trying to think what else is.
Oh man, so many. Peacock from NBC.
Discovery Plus, and then the merger with HBO.
Exactly. That is, it definitely has been super, super impactful for you know, the client side of the business, which ultimately trickles down to us. So
it's been interesting for me is watching how those creative teams kind of merge and shed. Like there's been a lot of that, like, you know, like that going on where like, you know, Discovery and HBO merging, and then like where that people land and where that ends up, and then we're seeing the different experiences, and then we're actually trying to bring people in. And something that's been really interesting to me is watching how Amazon has been very much so on the social media influence, because they did the whole like launch of I'm going to try to think, what's the new Lord of the Rings?
The Rings of Power, which was also one of my campaigns that I managed.
Okay. But did you see any of that whole, I did the whole like Comic-Con in Brazil?
Yeah.
Where like, I was just looking at that, I was like, that's a huge.
Massive.
Huge, like, marketing push.
Massive.
Right? Because I mean, like, it make Comic-Con here look like small potatoes.
Yeah.
So it was just interesting seeing that kind of side of it, of like that. So like, are you guys doing any stuff like as far as like with social media influencers or things like that? Are you been diving into that at all?
So working now at Art Machine. Art Machine is part of the Trailer Park Group, which is the umbrella, and under Trailer Park Group, there's several different divisions. So Art Machine primarily we primarily do the print, but we also have our digital and social capacities. There's also Trailer Park that does AV, all the trailers, and
because I mean, a lot of times you're going to be securing those assets all at the same time, and then it's distribution. So that's where.
And even though we're all part of the same family, the companies still operate very differently. There's some cross functionality, of course, but you know, a lot of times the clients are coming to us with, they need a 360 campaign, so it benefits them to come to a place like Trailer Park where Art Machine can't do it, we know somebody who can do it and who will do it and will work with us to make sure it meets your demands, you know.
So curious in that experience now, because all this is so new and emerging like that. How do you go about testing that out to find out what works for a client and what doesn't? You know, like, because I mean, like, it's such a strange world as far as like how everything's being distributed now.
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about relationships, right? Because they're trying to figure it out on their end too. You know, they just want marketing that resonates amongst the audience, and the audience is so fickle now. You know, like and they're all over the place, and so it just requires. I think it just requires a level of wanting to understand the marketplace and taking those risks and taking those chances and presenting it to them, hopefully with the hopes that it aligns with their ultimate strategy. Yeah, it's a challenge that we're faced with every day, I think.
So what's the last movie you saw?
Oh, the last film I saw in theaters?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
This is where we lie.
I know, right? It's gonna be embarrassing. Was it Nope? I know.
Damn, girl.
I know, it's bad. It's bad. Okay. Well, I had a whole thing with theaters for a minute too, where I was just like,
fair. I mean, like,
COVID,
you know, like you can't come in there with your like cleanser on everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, okay.
But yeah, with streaming now, like, I don't want to say who needs to go to the movies. It's a completely different experience, and some people like that.
Well, I think again, here's the part, right? Like, I just saw John Wick last week.
Oh, okay.
But
Very
then
good.
I saw Top Gun, and like there's like some movies where I feel like you definitely need to see things
Top
in
Gun
theaters,
for sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at it and you're working on this business, I think something that you have to kind of like stay aware of is like, what is the movie experience like?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do people like that? Like, there's something about walking through the rows and seeing all the posters of the upcoming events. And like me, I love going to trailers, right?
Yeah.
Like my girlfriend gets so pissed, and she's like, no, we gotta get there to trailers. So it's like 20 minutes. I'm like, it's fine. Like, no, I like watching the trailers because, God, what did I just see? There's like this one on this Finnish movie that's coming out. I think it's called Sims or Sam's or something like that. And it's very Inglorious Bastards type of, the teaser is phenomenal.
Okay.
And I just saw it like honestly on YouTube the other day, but I saw it in the theater, and just the color grading and just like it's very shtick, you know? It's very like Guy Ritchie kind of. I mean, it's like, and it's just like it was just an amazing trailer. I was like, wow, whoever did this trailer was like amazing.
I wonder if Trailer Park did it.
I'll have to go look and see, but it's about this Finnish guy battling Nazis because his family got taken away from the whole thing. But it's very like, again, Tarantino, Guy Ritchie kind of like shtick, right? And great coloring and setting up and sound design. So like I go there for that, right? And so like going for the movies and experience, I think like as marketers, like you need to kind of see like what the audience is like responding to, because like you can just hear it in the audience what people are into, right?
Yeah.
Like because it's like I can't give it away.
Yeah.
But there's this part in John Wick that was like definitely the part where I was like, okay, too much, you know. But it was just funny hearing how the audience reacted to that part, right? Like some people were laughing, some people were like, oh come on, you know. But it's you get that visceral experience.
Absolutely.
So that's all, and I just think that's interesting when you look at that as far as like whether you're cutting teasers or trailers or making posters or something like that. What are the parts that you can make that the audience will respond to that'll drive them to come into the movie? Versus like, okay, you want to leave this out because you don't want to give everything away, but also like, you know, it's like the bees with honey.
Yeah.
You know?
I find a lot of trailers though, I don't know. It feels like they do give it away. They do give away like the punchline, and it's a lot more narrative in trailers these days. And I don't know. I'd assume that that's strategic in itself, but it still drives people to go out to watch the film. So yeah, it's interesting. Going back to your question about what's the last film that I saw in theaters. So I don't know if it counts. It counts for me, but I've been really into like watching old films.
Okay.
Going to see old films.
That's fine.
So The last
no wrong
film,
answers.
no wrong answer, right. This is your authentic experience. So the last film that I saw was this film called Dry Long Soul. Are you familiar with it? It came out in 98. It was shot in 95. It came out in 98 by this woman, Colleen, I think her name's Colleen Smith. Based out of the Bay, Black woman, and it just centers around this young woman. She's the protagonist in the film, and her experience growing up in Oakland. It was like I like to see. I like older films that are pre like this social media age because it just feels like. Sometimes I find that content now is tailored too much to the audience and isn't, just intrinsically artistic.
Well, it's funny because that's how people viewed Blade Runner 2049. Because Denis Villeneuve, it was long and it was drawn out and there was lots of moments of silence, but the cinematography was beautiful, the color grading thing, and it was just the moments of silence of some of the things of Ryan Gosling coming to terms with the fact that that he was an android or anything like that, and seeing those different cuts and just creating these vast landscapes. They were talking about this for Dune, and some of the stuff that they talk about with Christopher Nolan, a lot of practical effects of building out these sets for people to actually feel in, and that's something that Ben Affleck was talking about with being Batman. He hated doing the green screen stuff, right? Because it just didn't resound with him.
Yeah.
And so Blade Runner 2049, because it was so long, and if you listen to the score on that, and you listen to the music and stuff, and it puts you in this mood, and just it's a movie experience.
It's an experience, exactly. Exactly.
That's a movie you have to go see in theaters to feel that kind of that escape things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so and some obviously don't need that, but that's definitely one of those things where that. But anyway, continue about the movie.
Yeah. So it's based out of Oakland. It's about this young girl who somewhat coming of age, but it was centered on a specific period in her life. And it just resonated because a lot of the themes are still things that we're dealing with now. The premise of it was she was a photographer. Coincidentally, she was a photographer who, or she was taking a photography class, and her subject matter was centered around that Black men are going to extinct. This was in the 90s when, there was a huge nationwide, epidemic, if you will, of Black men being killed.
And still today.
Exactly. It still resonates today. That's why for me it was just so fascinating watching this film and being wow, a lot of these themes are still real today. And even though social media wasn't popping at that time, and I was a teenager at the time. I'm growing up in inner city Detroit, so of course I knew this. This is reality, but yeah, it was just, I like seeing these older films for that escapism to just go back, and now with all the knowledge that we have now and all the experience that we have now, how much things have changed, and most importantly, how much things have not changed. How much we're still dealing with the same, systemic issues, constantly. So, yeah.
So, good for you?
Great movie.
Okay.
Recommend Dry Long Soul. That's what it's called.
I will check it out.
Yeah.
So, to wrap it up, here's the one thing that I always ask of all the guests, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Great question. I would tell my younger self, follow your passion. Don't be so inspired or influenced by the fear. I feel like growing up, especially in our community, a lot of how we are encouraged to move through life is what to avoid, like how to do things so that, how to make a better life for yourself so that you aren't poor or you aren't a starving artist or you aren't,
Well,
or
it's
that.
interesting how a lot of things, like, it's like projections from your parents.
Exactly. And out of, them wanting the best
For
you.
you. And sometimes
But at the
it works
same
in the negative ways.
Exactly, because you find yourself living for other people and not for yourself. And so that's what I would encourage myself is like, Samira, what do you really want to do? Like, don't be so influenced by how other people perceive you. People see you're smart and people are gonna, encourage that, and that's fine, but you can be smart and still be artistic and still seek out the things that you really want to do. I sought out safety, and it never, we went through my whole journey. It never led to any epiphanies that was just like, this is what you're supposed to do. It's just like, I bopped around and eventually I found my way. I'm still finding my way, honestly. Like,
well, that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
It was going to be like, so, because it's interesting, again, it's been, these different years and stages that we've interacted with that. It's like, do you feel like you're living your authentic self now?
I do. I think I'm living my authentic self. I know I'm living my authentic self now because I'm able to bring my whole self, and it's not only expected, but it's desired. Like, it's rewarded. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And when I'm my true authentic self, when I'm living in my truth, that's when I feel most fulfilled. Right. So I think I figured it out, but I got a ways to go, and it's exciting.
Well, the funny thing too is, like, now what's great about that, when you kind of figure it out and you're actually giving this advice, it's like being able to go back and tell other people
exactly
that. So that's like the interesting thing where it becomes transitional.
Yes.
Because now you're being able to tell other people about the things that you've kind of like understood and experienced. So that's just amazing. And so thank you so much for joining us on the Social Studies Show. It's been, honestly, like, this has been an amazing show. Like, it's been really great just to hear your perspective and things like that, and like just hear a different perspective of just like being a Black woman in the entertainment industry and being able to share that knowledge. So hopefully, I'm sure you've inspired a bunch of women out there that look like you to go do their thing and follow their authentic dreams.
Awesome. I hope so. I really do. I have tons of nieces and nephews, and I tell them all the time, like, especially now in this day and age, you can really create your own world and your own, they have so much opportunity now with social media and with just technology, period.
You can Google anything.
Google University is true. And like, I think there's just so much more exposure that they have now to being able to see, like, you can create your own career.
Well, it's great because you can really reach people, and it's a lot less gatekeeping.
Exactly.
Because, like, when you had to go shoot and film and go through all these different people's roles and like getting stuff in magazines and stuff like that, like, you can just go, you can create your own magazine.
It's true.
You can get on InDesign, learn how to make InDesign and make your own.
Yeah.
And like just build your own, like, kind of like, again, build your own world. So that's great advice. Love
Thank
it.
you. Thanks,
you.
Dan. It's an honor.
If you enjoy the Social Studies Show, please hit like and subscribe. If you found the information in the program relevant and insightful, copy the link, share it with your friends. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. These small gestures help increase the awareness and growth of our show. Thank you.